Getting ready. I think we have thank you. All right, if the Senate would please come to order. Madam Clerk, if we could do a rolling, if we could call the roll, let's get a quorum call going.
Mr. President?
All right, members, we're getting there. How are we looking? Has everyone recorded their presence? All right, I think we have who we have at the moment. All right, the clerk will take the call. All right, we have 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present. The Senate of Maryland is now again in session. All right, Senators, so tonight we have the final message from the House, which is the final vetoed bill. We have a fair amount of work that is unfinished business or from Wednesday. And then we are waiting on a bill from the House. They are hopefully going into session, and this is the Relief Act, the one that everybody has been working very, very hard on, and that is up potentially for concurrence, depending on the outcome in the House today. So the goal is, if we can get through the veto bill, we'll take up as much as we can until we get the concurrence. Once we get the concurrence, we will take that up, and we'll probably be able to call it an evening at that point. All right. Any announcements or for the good of the order before we go ahead and get in? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into the first message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 932, 2020. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration by order Sylvia Seagar.
Message having been read is ordered journalized. The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? And yes, sir, Chair recognizes the Senator from Anne Arundel.
Thank you very much. Just a few more questions, if I could, to the Vice Chair.
Will the floor leader yield for questions?
It's Groundhog Day. Great
Senator,
to be
may
back
proceed.
with you.
Well, thank you for answering those other questions for me as we set the stage for the final questions I have for you are, what types of downloads on the internet are covered? For instance, the majority of these things, I think, are very obvious and agreed upon, such as satellite service or cable service. Is that right?
Yeah.
Comcast, Verizon.
If it would help, Senator, go ahead. Go with your question. That's fine.
Okay. And then music downloads,
Yep.
books and e-books.
Yep.
live performances. Now, again, a live performances which is not charged for, there's obviously no tax. It's
Right.
only if there's a charge.
Right.
Okay.
The principle, if I might, Senator, the principle is if it's taxable offline, it should be taxable online. Otherwise, you create this gap, and that's why Senator Serafini and I proposed this bill, was to make sure that the same thing that would be taxable offline would be taxable online. That's the concept.
But the computer has things that aren't available in the real world, such as applications, cell phone rings that people have to pay for. And are they taxable also?
If they are taxable, I mean, for telecom service is a great example. Telecom service is taxable today.
Okay. And of course, games, audio greeting cards. Now, we've developed recently in the online world chat rooms and podcasts. And some of these actually have to be paid for to help support the person who's hosting it. Would they be eligible, or would they be included in being taxed?
I believe so. If you think of it like you and I are both old enough to remember records and record players. It's like when you buy a record, or you buy a tape, or you download it. Same principle.
Yeah, but these are chat rooms and podcasts. There's no equivalent in the real world. Okay. And then also, there's no equivalent, well, maybe there is. If you go to a Best Buy and you buy software to load into your computer,
Yep.
the software that you might be able to download directly and pay for, that would be taxed.
If it's taxable offline, it's under this bill to be taxable online.
Okay, so the first one that I found of interest is, what about this new creation called Zoom?
I understand.
Is that taxable also?
Well, telecom services are, so that would be an interpretation issue for the controller's office. There are some gray areas here, and the controller regularly has to make those kind of distinctions when you have these gray areas. But conceptually, it's a telecom service.
Okay. Now, I gave a heads up to the chairman, and I think he talked to you about it. What about education which is being done online? Let's take one of our great online universities. It used to be UMUC, now
Yep.
it's University of Maryland Global Campus.
Great example. Great example.
It wasn't taxed previously.
Right. UMGC offers courses on site and online. They're not taxable on site. They wouldn't be taxable online.
And any other not or for-profit or not-for-profit colleges, high schools, continuing ed, things of that nature.
Yeah. The principle is if we're not taxing it offline, we're not going to tax it online.
Okay, very good. How about legal and accounting services? We can now go get LegalZoom, or we can do payroll by computer.
Same principle. If a legal or accounting service is taxable offline, it would be taxable online. Today, in Maryland, they are not taxable offline. Therefore, with this bill, they would not be taxable online.
Okay. Senator, thank you very much for clarifying some of those things. I think it's a good question to ask and make sure
It's a great question.
we understand the legislative intent.
Yep.
Because I've been told that it's not just what's in print, it's what we've shared as a committee, what we shared on the floor is important for the public and the regulators and the courts to understand what we're trying to accomplish.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Senator.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. President, I do want to share just a few other short comments. I have with me the letter from Governor Hogan, dated May 7th. The body of his letter says, "These misguided bills will raise taxes and fees on Marylanders at a time when many are already out of work and financially struggling. With our state in the midst of a global pandemic and economic crash, and just beginning on our road to recovery, how he didn't see how long this was going to hang on, it would be unconscionable to raise taxes and fees now. To do so would further add to a very heavy burden that our citizens are already facing." And that is one of the many reasons that I'm against this bill at this time. The chairman shared, we don't need the revenue for about 4 years. The vice chairman we went through the list of all the different areas that would be impacted. And again, for our low and moderate income households, it's a pretty regressive tax. It affects an awful lot of things. And the final comments have to do with the fiscal note. Small business effect, potentially meaningful. Small businesses that sell digital products may be negatively impacted to the extent consumers stop buying certain digital products due to the imposition of a sales and use tax. And Mr. President, it's very interesting. One of my constituents, a good friend, a small business owner, called me yesterday. His name is Chen Vong. He left Vietnam when he was 4 years old. He and his family came to America. They started out in California. He eventually came to Maryland. Not a great education, but a great work ethic. So he went to the thing that he knew the best. He was a Taekwondo instructor. So as a young man in Crofton, Maryland, he started giving lessons. He rented out a small studio. He started building his clientele. He was very innovative. He started doing after-school work. He would send his buses around to pick up the kids at the after school, bring them back to his facility, sit them down and make them do their homework, and then teach them Taekwondo. And as we know, this is a form of exercise. It's a form of self-defense. It teaches independence and self-reliance and confidence. And over the years, he did so well that he built himself a 50,000 square foot building. The top floor of 25,000 he turned into a studio. He had probably several hundred students who would show up at some time during the week. He bought a reasonable house in Crofton, not a big mansion anywhere, but a nice house in a nice neighborhood. And he is the American dream, as we like to say. Mr. President, at about 5 o'clock last night, he called me up and he was almost in tears. He said, "Senator, I can't pay more taxes. My income has been reduced 85%. I'm in my reserves. I'm borrowing from my mortgage to pay the rent on my building. I'm about to lose everything." And I think he was voicing the problems with not only exercise and Taekwondo and the other type of exercise places. He was expressing the fears and the concerns of daycare centers who have not yet rebounded back. He's expressing the concerns of the restaurants and the service industry that have not yet come back. This is not the time to impose more taxes on good, hard-working folks. I look at this and I know that I'll be able to pay my extra tax when it passes. But these are the people, the people in the street who are trying hard. They don't work for large corporations. They're self-employed or they're employees of self-employed people, and they're trying hard to keep their dignity, to keep their assets above water, so to speak. And he pleaded with me, and I'll pass the plea on to you and the members of this body. This is not the time. It's not needed for the cash flow, and people are struggling. We can delay it a year or two. I'm not saying that the body doesn't want to have it imposed to help fund this education piece, but this is not the time, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the Chair of Budget and Taxation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just say that I understand the predicament that your local business person is in, but I would not consider this an extra tax in this sense. This bill is called the Economy Fairness Act, and that's because businesses like local bookstores, local record shops, CD shops, those places largely have gone out of business. They've gone out of business for a lot of reasons. But one component that added to that fact was that the internet was providing services, providing goods free of tax. And they couldn't because their products were taxed. It's the same issue in my mind. This is just about fairness to everyone based on the nature of the product or service. And quite frankly, I think it's only about fairness. I wanted to add one other issue, just to follow up on some of the comments that you had earlier with the Vice Chair. It is going to be, in terms of the clarity issue, and what is covered and what is not covered. And he was absolutely right. The comptroller is going to have to make some decisions. There's going to be regulation, and some of it might not be perfect. A couple of years ago, we had an issue where forensic engineers somehow got defined as detectives, and we're in the same realm of that. And we corrected it. And I would suggest in this same case, if there are those kinds of problems, when they're brought to the committee, we'll correct those things. Because again, at the end of the day, this is about treating businesses fair, whether they're through the internet or not. We certainly have done that in multiple cases, including the Marketplace Facilitator, you'll hear me say again, and we did it because there's a new economy. And either we're going to be part of that new economy or we're going to ignore it. And we're going to give them, the ability to be untaxed when our local brick and mortars are taxed. So I'd suggest we vote to override this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of Finance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just playing off of the chair and the vice chair's comments, what's interesting is I heard the gentleman from Anne Arundel talk about tax increases. So just a few years ago, states like ours could not tax online sales. It took the United States Supreme Court in a case Wayfair and a 5-4 decision to come in and give the states latitude to bring our states and our ability to collect taxes into the modern world. And so this is absolutely just a modernization, updating of the way we collect taxes in the United States. And in that case, and I think this might be interesting for my friends from the other side of the aisle, that was a 5-4 decision. 3 of the justices in the majority were Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas. And the basic rationale of that case was that this is a market distortion that currently exists. As the gentleman, the chair of Budget and Tax said, it's a market distortion because you've got your brick and mortars on one side of the equation, and it's not a level playing field, and it gives a competitive advantage. And for all those reasons, we're just doing exactly what Justices Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch said in that particular case in front of the United States Supreme Court. So for those reasons, I adopt the rationale of those 3 bright gentlemen, and so I will be putting a green vote up, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Question before the body is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This was kind of we had a little debate on it, then we went to the next bill, and we came back to it now. So I just wanted to clarify one comment that was said during the debate, that the money would go into the general fund. It actually goes into the Blueprint Fund. It doesn't go into the general fund. So just to clarify that. And I don't know if you say bored or whatever, but I listened across the hall and heard their explanation why we needed this bill. It was very short. They basically just read a former Republican senator's 2-minute explanation on the Senate floor here, and then they sat down. So all I can say to that is Republicans and Democrats are not monolithic on every topic, as evidenced by one of our former Republicans supporting this bill, and in fact, one of your Democrat colleagues voting against this bill. Putting those two aside, the main philosophical division in this debate is Democrats are advocating for higher taxes during a pandemic, and Republicans are battling against raising taxes during a pandemic. Today's debate really highlights the contrast in our priorities during a pandemic. Not even a month into session, and the very first bill we pass in this body is a combined new massive $250 million tax increase on the people of Maryland. On the other hand, the governor has been focused on offering targeted COVID relief measures. Former Senate President Miller used to say, "It is what it is." But I find it very revealing of our priorities. This is a choice of priorities, as this veto override could wait until later in the session, or as I will show in my arguments, that this could wait until next year. This is a conscious decision to impose this tax as soon as possible. Now to my thoughts on the bill. If one massive tax increase wasn't enough, we have another tax during a pandemic. Today, we will see millions in new tobacco taxes affecting every demographic. Today, we will see millions in new digital advertising taxes impacting all of Maryland. And now we have another $100 million in new entertainment downloading taxes affecting rich and poor, seniors and young alike. To be clear, these combined actions will take $250 million with a B out of Marylanders' pocket every year. To be honest, politicians are often accused of being out of touch with mainstream citizens. So when they hear we are debating raising $250 million in new taxes during a pandemic, it just confirms their suspicions. Some politicians don't live in the real world. I'd like to start by sharing a few real-life comments my constituents that contacted my office on this bill. Tony from Pasadena really summed up people's frustrations when he said, quote, "The pandemic is taxing our way of life. Don't tax our empty wallets as well," unquote. Beth from Millersville said, "We have all faced hardships this year, and the pandemic has totally changed lifestyles. We even have to limit our physical contact with one another. The small pleasures one can experience virtually should remain affordable for the mental well-being of the young and old alike, if nothing else." Richard from Baltimore said, "We are on a fixed income, and any kind of tax increases would be detrimental to our lifestyle. We just make it month to month, especially the months with car and homeowners insurance." This is not just some philosophical debate about taxes. This will have lasting and devastating impact on real people. Now to the specific topic, the digital download tax. I'd like to discuss 3 points. The first, there is absolutely no good reason to pass this burdensome tax today, and at a minimum, this tax should be delayed. Secondly, this is a regressive and unfair tax that targets those hurt most by COVID. Third, the insatiable focus of always raising taxes should be refocused to lowering taxes. So to my first point, at a minimum, this tax increase should be delayed. With millions of Marylanders struggling financially due to the COVID pandemic, it makes no sense to move forward with this $100 million tax increase today, especially when it is not needed this year. This new tax would go into Kirwan's Blueprint for Maryland's fund. And what have we been hearing from the proponents repeatedly? We heard it on the floor this morning. They have been boasting that Kirwan has a stockpile of money, so much that it's paid for in the next few years. Right here on this floor this morning, we had the senator from Montgomery County and the B&T chair state that they have enough for 4 years. We take them at their word. The state has sufficient money in the Blueprint Fund for several years, so there is absolutely no necessity for this tax this year. So I asked the body, what is the burning need to tax more Marylanders when they have just received a COVID sucker punch to the gut? At the very least, this tax should wait a year, when hopefully we are out of the pandemic and people are starting to pull themselves up from their financial nightmare. Maryland, let me be clear. We as Republicans stand with you. We understand your pain. We understand your hardship you are going through. And we cannot fathom passing a $100 million tax on you when you are down and struggling. We believe the urgency of helping people during a pandemic should take precedence over taxing people just because one has the authority to tax people. Where is our compassion? Where is our sense of decency and fairness? People are trying to pay their basic living expenses and cope with the COVID seclusion. And now Maryland is proposing to tax the one area that has helped people through this pandemic. Sadly, the timing of this veto override says, Maryland, we understand you're going through tough times. We really do. But the state wants your money, and we want it now. The timing of this bill is wrong on so many levels. The data shows we can and should delay this tax. At a very minimal, we as a body just need the courage to do what is right by the people. My second point, This is a regressive and unfair tax that targets those most hurt by COVID. This is a regressive tax that affects every level of income and hurts low and moderate income people more as a percentage of their income. It is simply cruel to take immediate action on these low and moderate income people who are struggling the most when it is not needed now. We just voted with the governor on a relief act that targeted low and moderate income individuals. But now with this action, we're saying, sorry, give it back. This makes no policy sense at all. Why does this body think we must raise regressive taxes on the people of Maryland now when there is no budgetary necessity? When some of you voted for this last March, no one knew we'd still be in a pandemic almost a year later. So given we are in the middle of a pandemic and COVID relief is the top priority of Marylanders, why in the world are we debating taxing the very people we're trying to help? There is still much work to be done for COVID relief. This makes no sense. And to my third point, the insatiable focus of always raising taxes should be refocused to lowering taxes. As far as the reasons claimed for this bill, there were two main ones. The first one, a changing economy must reflect in our tax laws, and it's not a tax increase. I won't focus on how electronic products are inherently different, such as a hardcover book versus an e-book, but it is a fact. Proponents claim the state is missing out on taxing electronic services while some sales have shifted to online. It is a flawed assumption that we must continue increasing taxes on everything that moves physically and electronically. Raising taxes is not always the solution. Maryland already collects $5 billion annually in its sales and use tax. How much is enough? The assumption behind this bill is that state taxes brick and mortar stores, so the only modern thing to do is tax electronic service as well. That is the old liberal philosophy that government needs more and more of your money. Progressive policies, aka rebranded old liberal policies, want to take more and more of your money independent of your pain as if it was their right. If you look at our tax history in Maryland, you will see it wasn't that long ago we didn't have many of these taxes. But over time, they've added state income tax, piggyback county taxes, sales taxes, gas taxes, transfer taxes, amusement taxes, excise taxes, airport taxes, cable taxes, and increasing the taxes after they have been in place for a while. And it goes on and on and on. It seems government has an insatiable appetite for higher taxes and taking your money. It's time to stop the liberal mindset that everything can be solved by big government and more taxes. We've been told year after year, decade after decade, if government had more of your money, they could achieve anything. We as government need to live within our means and treat taxpayer money as if it were our own. Then and only then will we see real reform. If you want real modernization of our tax code, instead of raising new taxes on digital downloads, we should focus on reforming and lowering brick and mortar taxation so they can be more competitive. Republican solutions involve helping more people keep money and keeping government out of their pockets. That's real 21st century fairness and tax modernization. And the second claim was this bill would make it more fair. Tell that to the person who just lost their job because of COVID, or someone struggling due to a lost loved one who was the sole provider for the house. Until we walk their walk or live through their experiences, fairness is definitely in the eyes of the beholder. I am sure they would see fairness in a much different light. Fairness in this bill is having Maryland take $100 million from hardworking Marylanders. No wonder politicians think this is fair. It's a $100 million windfall. We have been quarantined, restricted, and told to reduce socializing. So naturally, what does family do? The young
Senators,
adults...
Please give the senator your attention, please.
The young adults might relax with music downloads. The parents may watch streaming movies or shows. The kids might download streaming video games, while others may exercise work apps and download ebooks through a range of services, to mention a few. At the end of the day, the family is forced to pay a lot more taxes. So I ask you again, given Kerwin is paid for the next few years, and the tax is dedicated directly to the Kerwin Fund, what is the burning need to pass this year? For compassion's sake, if nothing else, delay this tax at least until next year. Lastly, I would like to share 4 comments from real people and put a face on this bill. Dave writes, I am retired and my wife and I live on a fixed income. Do you know what all these tax increases do to our budget? I am fighting cancer, and today's drugs are not cheap. Now I truly understand why so many people are leaving Maryland. Linda writes, my husband and I are retired and find it hard to continue keeping up with our financial increases being imposed from cable TV, internet, utilities, etc. Our pay does not increase to cover these costs, which are too high as they might stand now. It will come to a point that we will not be able to afford these services due to extra fees and taxes. Everyone has endured great difficulty during the COVID-19 hit early last year, and we continue to endure these difficulties today. Tax increases during these times are not the answer. Maryland is not a friendly state for retirees and very difficult for young families to afford living here. Elizabeth writes, House Bill 932 on digital downloads will directly affect us. We have already decreased Netflix because of increased provider costs. Please don't make us cut back other streaming services because of additional tax, especially during a pandemic when we are isolated in our home. And finally, Tim writes, having our taxes raised again will hurt my family. I am a senior citizen, and my medical bills keep going up, and I can't afford this. Please find a way to stop this tax increase for the citizens of Maryland. So in conclusion, the proponents talk about modernization and fairness in taxation. This is neither modern or fair. To recap, a pandemic is the worst time to be taxing struggling Marylanders. This is an unfair, regressive tax with greater impact on low and moderate income individuals. And third, unbelievably, this tax is targeted at the service area that is helping people cope in COVID. Fourth, modernization of our tax code should focus on lowering taxes and making brick and mortar business more competitive instead of adding new taxes to online sales. Lastly, if our current budget is balanced without this tax increase and the Blueprint Fund is sufficient fund for several years, why are we passing an unnecessary tax during a pandemic? This is a new, cruel, and unnecessary tax. I ask you to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you.
Question before the body is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objection of the chief executive? A green vote will override the governor's veto. A red vote will sustain. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their
President.
vote. The chair recognizes the vice chair of the committee has 2 minutes.
I'd just like to explain my vote. I appreciate the minority leader posturing this issue in the differences between Democrats and Republicans, and I think the votes today are so dramatic in that regard. The Democrats voted to override the governor's veto of a bill to hold down drug prices. Our Republican friends voted with the drug companies. The Democratic majority voted to override the governor's veto of investing in our kids' education. Our Republican friends voted against it. The Democratic majority voted to make sure that big tech pays its fair share of taxes. Our Republican friends voted against it. And right now, looking up on the board, the Democrats are voting to protect our Main Street businesses, and the Republicans are voting to protect the big out-of-state sellers. So I really appreciate the minority leaders dramatizing the partisan difference here. It's serious, it's philosophical, it's real. We're looking out for ordinary people, and we welcome them to our side in the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Any further
President.
senators wish to explain their vote?
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from District 5.
Thank
Has
you,
2
Mr.
minutes.
President. The differences are clear, huh? Well, I'm proud of my vote here to support not raising taxes in a terrible pandemic with an economy that is definitely on the edge for many people. I wanted to say that I think it's been really great the way that we've worked together as both parties, particularly on the Relief Act. I don't think the rhetoric of deciding that if you don't want more government intervention into a certain part of the economy is bad means that you want drug prices to be high, which is not in this bill. But I do think that I think it's really important that we say there's a point where there's an enough is enough kind of standard, and in Maryland we are past it. We have raised taxes now twice in this. We had two bills raising taxes, and we've had a dramatic expansion of spending with not a whole lot of accountability. So there's legitimate reasons to be against this bill, and there are legitimate reasons to support the governor's veto. I don't think it comes down to as clearly as ideology as it does just the people that we know and we interact with and that we see that would be hurt by raising taxes at this time. So I'm proud to be supporting the governor's veto, and I'm proud of standing up for what I believe is right. And I think the people here that have voted against overriding the governor's veto on all these vetoes are proud that we've stood up for what we know and believe is right and for the constituents that we represent. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any further senators wish to explain their vote? Chair recognizes the senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't look at this as a party issue whatsoever. I hear my constituents. I hear what they say. And I respect what they tell me if I'm for it or I'm against it. But I listen to them. And I've heard them many times over. They're sick and tired of being taxed. They're so tired of taxes. And so when I see something like this, I see it's a burden. And again, I don't see this whatsoever as a party issue. I see this as a burden down business and people issue and the trickle down effect that it does all the time. And that's all I need to say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The clerk will take the call.
Mr. President?
With 29 votes in the affirmative, HB 932, the governor's veto is overridden. All right. Thank you, senators. All right, we have...
I'm going to read the message.
Oh, the message. Yes, the clerk, read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate of Maryland has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 932, 2020. Said bill is returned to the House herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Constitution of Maryland by order Nicole M. Alexander.
The message having been read is adopted. All right, we have a... One moment. All right, we have it. We have one last piece of work today. We have a concurrence from the House. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 496, the President, Recovery for the Economy, Livelihoods, Industry, Entrepreneurs, and Families Relief Act. This is an emergency bill.
The chair recognizes the chair of Budget and Taxation to explain the amendments from the House.
Thank you, Mr. President. So there are 9 amendments. I'll try to quickly get through them. Number 1 is technical. Number 2 limits the eligibility for subtraction modification for unemployment insurance benefits to years 20 and 21 to individuals who federal adjusted gross income does not exceed certain amounts. Amendment 3 increases for tax years 20 and through 22 the percentage of federal earned income credit used for determining the amount of refundable Maryland earned income tax credits. Number 4 makes clarifying and technical corrections relating to provisions of laws that relate to pass-through entities. This is really a correction from last year's bill that you may recall that allowed the pass-through entities and therefore our taxpayers to take full advantage of state and local deductions. Number 5, The amendment permits employers to defer unemployment insurance reimbursement and payments for the first 3 quarters of calendar years 21, and permits the Secretary of Labor to authorize deferrals for calendar year 2022. Amendment
Excuse me,
6.
Mr. President?
Yes, Senator, what purpose does Senator rise?
I guess a point of order here.
Senator, may proceed.
I can't find these amendments on my screen, and I know that the floor leader is trying his best to be articulate, but I can't understand what he's saying.
Senator, give us just a moment. This is our first concurrence, so we are first concurrence of the year. Under reprints, with House third reader reprints on the bill, Senate Bill 496. Do senators see it? All right. Senator may proceed.
I'll try to talk a little louder. Senator, Amendment number 6 limits from 4 months to 3 months after enactment the period of time in which certain collectors of sales and use tax may claim the enhanced vendor credit under the bill. Amendment number 7 limits eligibility for the economic impact payments under the bill to the EIC recipients for tax years 2019, and in light of the alterations to the EIC for tax years 2020 through 2022. Amendment number 8 alters the amounts included in the Recovery Now Fund, and Amendment 9 specifies the application and termination of certain provisions of the law. Just broadly speaking, because I know that's a lot to think about. The bill we sent over was modified by reducing some of the money that was included in the programs that we outlined. As you may recall, we had about 30 programs or line items that were designed to help various industries and citizens. Some of that money was cut in part to allow for additional programming to be done. One of those programs had to do with new funding for energy assistance. It beefed the number up considerably, close to, I believe, $90 million. Another thing that occurred was the creation or the expansion of our existing earned income tax credit to raise and made it a lot more generous. We moved from 28% of income to 45%. It's really going to help working citizens, those of low income, and it's probably one of the most successful programs that we've got out there that over decades has been wildly accepted by both Democrats and Republicans across the country. There's also a provision that allows for from a cash flow perspective, allows businesses to delay for 1 year their payments, their premium payments for uninsurance benefits. So basically, those were the largest portions of the program. A couple small changes to the governor's program, things like reducing from 4 months to 3 months businesses' ability to hold on and not remit sales taxes. But largely, his program is intact. They've added some additional benefits. And as I said, for all of our benefits are largely there also, although in reduced numbers. I hope that is generally clarifying.
All right.
So I would move to concur.
The chairman moves to concur. question before the body is, shall the Senate concur with the House amendments? I believe we have to take a roll call vote on these. Not required? Are there any objections to, or let's just do it by the yeas and nays. Questions on the amendments? All in favor of the amendments say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The Senate Bill 496 is now in the Senate on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And colleagues, I ask for your indulgence because I'm still getting used to breathing through a mask. And I think it just reminds us of what time we are in during this pandemic. And this bill, we've talked a lot on the floor today about what our priorities are. This is one of the top, if not the priority, of this legislative session. We have seen livelihoods destroyed, and we've seen lives lost. And this is a clear message to Marylanders everywhere. If you're a small business, if you're a restaurant, if you're unemployed, or if you're a Marylander, relief is on its way, not next year, not in the next month, but now. And that is why we put partisanship aside and put public service first. And that is why every Democrat is on this bill, because Marylanders expect and deserve that from us. So we're sending a very powerful signal right now, Mr. President, colleagues, that relief is on its way.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Chair recognizes the Minority Whip.
Yeah, thank you. And I would just like to second what my colleague from Montgomery County said, and thank Budget and Tax, and thank everyone who worked on this bill. It's good when we can come together in a bipartisan moment and do something. I know there was some haggling on the other side of the chamber, or the other across the aisle here, or say the House chamber, but I think the Senate really showed leadership here, and we did the good thing. We're going to get direct aid to people and relief. It's not a perfect bill. Compromises are never perfect. It maybe spends a little bit more than I would like, and there's some programs in there, the arts or other things that I'm not sure that are exactly the best to be on here. But nonetheless, I think this is a good bill overall. There's far more better here than some of the things I don't like, and I would concur just with my colleagues. I say this is great leadership that was shown by the Senate, the Senate President, by the leadership here, and very proud to cast a green vote for this.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion on the bill? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? Chair, in explaining his vote, just wants to say thank you to the Senate of Maryland. This has been a hard week. This has been a really, really tough week with a lot of really tough issues that have been political, and it's very easy in these moments in the political world to just let the spiral go. And what we're doing here today is coming together as the Senate of Maryland, saying we know what the most important thing is to get done. This is the first bill of this session that will have passed both chambers, and it matters because Marylanders are hurting, and this is their elected officials coming together to saying we are getting you aid as soon as possible. I want to thank each and every member of this body. The clerk will take the call. Senate Bill 96, having received a unanimous majority, is declared passed. All right, Senators, we have a lot left, but we're going to push it to next week. Let's see. Announcements. Finance. Any announcements for finance? Education, Health, Environmental Affairs. Chair recognizes the chair.
Yeah, Mr. President, while I hate to do this, we'll have a brief voting session starting at 5 o'clock in the committee room.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair recognizes the Chair of Budget and Taxation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will have, Budget and Tax will have a full committee voting session at 11 a.m. on Monday, and then at 1:30, the Health Subcommittee will meet and the Public Safety Subcommittee will meet.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet back in the committee at 5 o'clock for a voting session.
Thank you, Senator. Working hard, JPR, as they always do. Chair recognizes the Chair of Executive Nominations.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will be meeting Monday at 5 o'clock. We have reduced the number of people we will be talking to. We have 7 judges and 11 other people. Hopefully it'll move very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further announced delegations or standing committees, select committees? All right, other announcements for the yes. Chair recognizes the chair of the Protocol Committee.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we weren't able to read off the names of our wonderful pages today because we usually mention them on Friday, but they're already gone home for the weekend, so we're not able to say goodbye to them or see their lovely faces up on the board. But I also did have another announcement, permission to use the senator's name.
Senator may proceed.
Tomorrow is Senator Carrozza's birthday.
Hey,
so
happy birthday.
Please wish her a wonderful happy birthday the day before Valentine's Day. So thank you all very much and have a good weekend.
Thank you so much, Senator. We do apologize to those pages for those who may be tuning in. We heard from a couple this morning, and they are just real. I mean, these are some talented young people. Any further announcements? Can Chair, just in discretion,
Mr. President?
Oh, yes.
I
Chair
know it's hard
recognizes-
to see.
Yes.
Since I don't think anyone else is going to say it, permission to use senators' names?
Senator may proceed.
Thank you. I just think Senator Eckert and Senator Hester have done a lovely job as protocol co-chairs, and just want to thank them on behalf, surely, of all of our colleagues for helping to bring a little joy as we prepare to celebrate Valentine's Day distantly.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, beat me to it. That's what I was just will reiterate. Ditto. This is a hard session, and they are bringing some joy to what is a hard time. Excellent. All right. Any further announcements for the good of the order before we head out? All right. Quorum call before adjournment.
Mr. President?
I'm sorry. Chair, Senator from District 8. Oh, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 43 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Tuesday, February 16th at 12 p.m.
Without objections,